My name is Danny Rhodes. I'm 31, and if you saw me on the morning of my wedding, you'd think I had it all together. Dress fitted like a second skin lipstick called Peony Regret, and a smile sharp enough to cut fondant. You'd see the elegant woman gliding across the venue like she owned it, which, in fairness, I did. I'd planned weddings for 8 years. I was supposed to know better. But nothing prepares you for someone walking down the aisle in the middle of your vows, not in a white dress, but in denim and fury and yelling, "You don't deserve her." That's the moment the music stopped. Not metaphorically. I mean, the string quartet just gave up. One violinist sort of squeaked a note like a dying squirrel, and then it was all silence. A slow, stretching silence that clawed at your spine and made the florist drop her clipboard. You might actually regret skipping this part. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the Final Revenge channel, but only if you really like what I have to say here. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. You stood there, veil tilted, thinking, is this a prank? A TikTok moment. One of those flash mobs where everyone ends up salsa dancing to Uptown Funk. Nope. The woman yelling. Her name was Margot. She was at least 50 with sun-damaged skin and hair like expired champagne. Her voice cracked from shouting, but not like someone unhinged. It was the kind of crack you only get from burying something for 20 years and finally letting it rot in the daylight. She doesn't know what he did, Margot said, stepping forward with this eerie calm like someone uninvited but deeply expected. I blinked, looking from her to Mason, the man who was supposed to be my husband in the next 30 seconds. He didn't look confused, or angry, or even embarrassed. He just looked tired, like this was a delay he'd factored into the schedule, and it was running a bit behind. Security, someone said from the back. One of my cousins. The one with a vape pen and a misguided sense of bravery. But Mason held up a hand. It's okay, he said softly, and then turned to me. Danny, let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. You plan a wedding for 12 months. You find the right florist who doesn't overdo the baby's breath. You taste 30 cakes until buttercream becomes a threat. You write vows that skim your soul into sonnets. And your fiancé looks you in the eye and says, let's talk right when you're about to become someone's wife. You could hear the whispers. One guest actually muttered, this is better than Netflix. She wasn't wrong. So what did you do? You turned on your heel, walked down the aisle backwards like someone rewinding a mistake. Not crying. Not yet. But your lungs started folding like paper bags. In the dressing room, you locked the door and collapsed onto the fainting couch because, yes, wedding planners are dramatic enough to insist on a fainting couch. Your maid of honor, Jules, banged on the door, but you just stared at your reflection. Lipstick smudged, eyes wide. You looked like a haunted Barbie. That's when you heard the knock on the window. Not the door. The window. Margot stood outside tapping once. You didn't open it. She just pressed a photo against the glass. It was old, faded. Two little girls sitting on a swing set, one of them unmistakably you and the other, someone you hadn't seen in almost 20 years, your half-sister Tilly, the one who vanished when you were 11, the one no one ever talked about again. You dropped the veil right then, let it flutter to the floor like a discarded metaphor. That was the moment you knew your wedding wasn't about vows or cakes or DJs who know the clean version of WAP. It was about Tilly, about whatever Margot knew, about the secret everyone else was pretending never happened. You didn't open the window. Not yet. You just stared. And Margot nodded like she understood. Then she turned and walked away. That was when Jules finally burst in. You okay? She asked, mascara already halfway down her cheeks. You looked at her and for once didn't say anything clever. Just stood there holding a ghost in your chest and a question you hadn't let yourself ask since you were a kid. What really happened to Tilly? You took off your heels, took off the ring, and walked out of that wedding like you were shedding a skin. No screaming, no drama. Just silence thick as frosting and 37 guests pretending to scroll their phones. Mason tried to follow. You didn't let him. Instead, you walked toward Margot's car, which was still idling by the curb. She didn't smile when you got in. Just put the car in drive and said one sentence that iced your spine. I promised your sister I'd come back when it was safe. You didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. You just knew the wedding was never yours to begin with. You were 8 when you first met Mason Clark. He was 12 tan from summers he didn't deserve, and already good at saying exactly what grown-ups wanted to hear. Your mom was dating his dad back then, short-lived, forgettable, but long enough for a few awkward blended family picnics and that one ill-advised camping trip where Mason tried to teach you how to skip rocks and ended up pushing you into a lake. He laughed so hard he peed a little. You didn't speak to him for 3 years, but people like Mason, they stick around. Not always front and center, more like background music. Comfortable, predictable. By the time you ran into him again in your mid-20s, you were knee-deep in tool and deposit contracts, and he was running marketing for some soulless organic beverage company called Fruitavana. He had a LinkedIn smile and a voice that made interns laugh like they were paid for it. You remember the way he asked you out? Like a pitch. Danny, I think we'd make a great team. We've got shared trauma complementary aesthetics and I can open jars. You said yes, mostly because he was funny. And your therapist had just challenged you to try men who weren't clearly broken. Mason seemed functional, which in hindsight is the most dangerous trait of all. You dated for a year before moving in together. His apartment had the personality of a tech startup. Gray walls, zero art, and a fern, he named Dave, that died in under a week. You redecorated. He didn't notice for a month. You chalked it up to being a man. Things were easy on the surface. He let you take the lead. He smiled through your Pinterest spirals. He didn't flinch when you whispered, "I want an October wedding." But you started to feel it, didn't you? That quiet resistance. Like every time you planned something big, he'd gently steer you smaller. Like when you talked about a band and he suggested a playlist. When you imagined your dad walking you down the aisle and he offered, maybe something less traditional. Or the time you mentioned inviting extended family and he got weirdly pale. "Do we really want to open that door?" he'd said. You told yourself it was nerves. Everyone's afraid of weddings. But deep down, it felt like he wasn't afraid of the commitment. He was afraid of who might show up. He never talked about his childhood. He said his mom died when he was a teen and his dad wasn't emotionally available. That phrase again and again like it was copyrighted. You'd pry a little, then drop it when he stiffened. You assumed that's what love looked like, respecting silence. But silence is just a mask for secrets. The engagement came out of nowhere. You were eating takeout on the couch, reruns of Friends playing on loop, and suddenly he pulled out a ring. No speech, no kneeling. Just, "I think we're ready." And again you said yes, because he was safe. Because being alone felt scarier than being slightly uneasy. Jewel cried when you told her. Your mom said, "Finally a man who doesn't flake." Your therapist paused and said, "Interesting. You should have listened to that pause." The wedding planning happened in a blur. You threw yourself into it like it was a job, which for you it sort of was. Mason kept saying, "Whatever you want, babe." That phrase again and again until it didn't sound like support. It sounded like a dare. But the cracks started showing around month 5. You'd ask him to taste cake samples, and he'd make a face like you'd offered him battery acid. You caught him zoning out during the rehearsal walkthrough. At one point, he flat out asked, "Why does the seating chart matter that much?" You laughed it off, but it gnawed at you. Because when someone's really with you, they care about what you care about, even if it's dumb. And this wasn't dumb. This was your day, your dream. Still, you kept going. Dress fittings, menu testing, dance lessons he fumbled through like a man walking on stilts. You held it together. Until the rehearsal dinner. It was held at this charming little rooftop bar downtown. Twinkling lights tapas the whole curated rustic chic vibe. Everyone was glowing with wine and fake stories. Your mom gave a toast that made you tear up. And then Mason raised his glass and froze. You were smiling, half listening when you saw his eyes catch on someone near the entrance. Just a flicker, 1 second. But it was the look people give when a ghost walks in wearing lipstick. You turned. There she was. A woman in a navy pantsuit, clearly overdressed, holding a wrapped box like she'd been told there was a white elephant exchange. She wasn't on the guest list. You knew every name, every +1, and Mason. He went pale. Like food poisoning in real-time pale. You went to her, politely at first. "Hi, I'm Danny. Can I help you?" She smiled tight like paper over glass. I'm Margot, she said. I was invited. You turned to Mason. He didn't say a word, just stared. Jules came over whispering, Want me to handle this? You shook your head. No, I'll handle it. Because something had just broken loose inside you. A memory, maybe? Or a warning. When Margot left that night ungracefully after your mom whispered something sharp, you didn't chase her. But you wrote her name down, and you asked Mason calmly who she was. He said nobody, then turned away, like that settled it. But you already knew. Nobody shows up at your rehearsal dinner unless they think they still have time to stop the wedding. You woke up the morning after the rehearsal with your dress still zipped halfway, one earring lost in the bed sheets, and a stomach that felt like it was rehearsing for something else entirely, like betrayal. The sun was warm and insistent, pouring through the gauzy curtains of the bridal suite like it had something to prove. You padded barefoot to the mirror, studying your reflection like it was a suspect. Mascara smudged, pillow creased cheek, eyes searching. Not for beauty, for certainty. You didn't find any. Then the knock came. Not loud. 2 taps casual. You thought it was Jules or your mom with coffee and wedding morning wisdom. But when you opened the door, it was her. Margot. Again. This time she didn't hold a photo. Just a box. Worn cardboard taped at the corners like it had been opened and resealed more times than it should. You blinked. She didn't flinch. Just give me 60 seconds, she said. Then I'll disappear. You didn't invite her in. You just stepped aside and let her take the chair by the window. The room still smelled like hairspray and stress. Margot didn't seem to notice. I used to babysit you, she said, opening the box. Your mouth went dry. Your pulse did that annoying thing where it suddenly remembers it's a drum. She pulled out a ragged stuffed bear gray missing an eye. You didn't remember it. Until you did. His name was Cheese, you whispered like your voice had to ask permission from your past. Margot smiled, not kindly, more like someone regretting something they can't fix. You had night terrors. You used to twist his ears when you were scared. You sat. You didn't remember doing that, but your fingers were already pinching air like they missed something. She was here too, Margot said. Your sister, Tilly. You didn't say her name. Couldn't I know, you whispered. No, she replied firm. You don't know. Not yet. She handed you a photo next. Tilly, maybe 7, gap-toothed and beaming, holding a homemade banner that read, Welcome home, Dad. Sloppy letters, too many exclamation points. But the man standing behind her, you recognized him instantly. Mason's father. Your stomach dropped. You want to tell me what I'm looking at? You asked slow, like your body was trying to keep your voice from collapsing. Margot exhaled. Tilly's dad. Yours too, I guess. But Mason's, that was your step-uncle. And Tilly knew something about him. Something she tried to tell me the night she disappeared. You stared at the picture again. There were too many connections. Too many forks in the family tree stabbing back into each other. Margot leaned forward. She came to me with a secret. She said she'd seen something. Heard something. She didn't have the words, but she was scared. She said she heard crying in the garage. You didn't breathe. Just counted the seconds between your heartbeats. I went to the house the next day. Margot said, voice. Now, brittle. But she was gone. Your mom said she'd run away. No police. No missing posters. Just gone. You remembered, sort of, hazy memories of being told to stop asking questions. Of your mother snapping Tilly's gone, and that's that. Of Cheese showing up in your bed even though he was Tilly's bear. That night you had dreams about her voice. Calling your name from the garage. You thought it was your imagination? It wasn't. You looked at Margot. Why now? She leaned back, weary. Because I finally found out who she tried to tell. Your breath caught. She told Mason. Margot said she went to him first. She trusted him. You couldn't speak. Couldn't even think. Just saw Mason's 12-year-old face again, the one who shoved you into the lake. The one who always smiled like he knew things you didn't. He'd known, since he was a kid. And now he was marrying you. You wanted to scream. You wanted to cry. Instead, you stood and calmly opened the closet. Your wedding dress hung there stiff and perfect and completely wrong. You didn't put it on. You turned back to Margot. What do I do? Her answer was simple. Finish what she started. You wanted to argue. You wanted to run. But something deep in your chest clicked into place. A part of you that had waited 2 decades for someone to finally give you permission to burn it all down. You took the box. Inside were letters, scribbled notes from Tilly, drawings of people with red X's through their faces, one half-burned page that simply said, "He knows." You opened your phone, looked at Mason's last text. "You looked beautiful last night. Let's make today count." You replied, "We'll make it unforgettable." Because you weren't calling off the wedding. Not yet. You were going to walk down that aisle. You were going to say the vows. And then you were going to tell the truth in front of every single person who had ever helped bury it, even if it ruined you, especially if it ruined him. You remember how he knelt, one knee on damp grass, smile sharp but camera ready under the flowering arch at the botanical gardens, where you'd once told him your dream wedding would happen. The air smelled like lilacs and staged sincerity. And still you said yes. The ring was rose gold oval-cut antique setting. Beautiful. You'd shown it off to clients like it meant something sacred, but now, as you sit here, piecing it all back together, you wonder how many lies you've worn on that finger. Because the proposal wasn't spontaneous. Not even close. You remember Jules asking afterward, "Did you know he was going to do it?" And you said no, but in your gut. You did. Something about the way he insisted on the specific date. The way he kept checking the weather. The way he told the event staff not to offer champagne until after the ring was on your hand. He'd rehearsed it, down to the minute. You used to think that was romantic. Now you think it was preparation. Insurance. That proposal came 2 weeks after your first serious fight. The kind that doesn't yell, it simmers. You'd found a locked drawer in his desk. You weren't snooping, not exactly, just rearranging papers. And there it was, cold-closed, very uncasual. He'd caught you. Didn't yell, just stared at you, cool and disappointed like a parent. "There are things in there from my mom," he said. "You wouldn't understand." That's all he gave you. No details. No apology. You let it go. 3 days later, he suggested a surprise outing. 3 days after that, you had a ring on your finger. You didn't think it was manipulation. Back then, you thought it was just emotional timing. Now you understand that he needed to lock you in before the truth even began to sniff around. Because proposals don't fix problems. They just make you too invested to leave. The day after he proposed, you tried to ask again. About the drawer. About his mother. About why he flinched every time someone brought up family. He said, "Danny, I thought we were past this." And that's when you realized he didn't want a partner. He wanted a participant. The wedding planning was his chance to perform normalcy. He learned to say all the right words. "Whatever you want. I trust your vision. It's your day." But his eyes never smiled when he said them. You remember one night late in bed. You had your laptop out researching venues with Gothic chandeliers and antique tile. He was quiet, scrolling his phone. You leaned over laughing and said, "If we ever have kids, I'm not naming them anything that ends in Aiden." He didn't laugh, just said, "We probably shouldn't talk about kids yet." You blinked. "Why not?" "We're planning forever." He shrugged. "Forever's flexible." You froze. He kissed your temple. "I just mean, let's get through the wedding first." And you laughed, nervously, like it was fine. Like that wasn't the most chilling thing someone could say to you with their arms wrapped around your waist. Forever's flexible. So you buried the feeling. You smiled at brunches, posted curated photos of your hand on his chest with the caption, "Lucky girl," and let everyone else tell you how happy you looked. Because the worst thing isn't being lied to. It's lying to yourself and calling it love. And now, sitting here with a box of Tilly's drawings and a growing sense of dread blooming behind your ribs, you realize how deep the performance really ran. Because Tilly didn't vanish. She was silenced. And if Margot's right, Mason knew exactly how to stay quiet. You think back to your childhood again. To that lake trip. How he laughed when you fell. How he told you dead serious that girls cry too easily and then dared you to climb back in the canoe. He was 12 then. But he already understood power. You go back through old photos. Childhood birthday parties. You and Tilly in matching dresses. Him always in the background. Watching. You zoom in. In one photo, your ninth birthday, Tilly's holding a homemade cake. You're mid-blow. And Mason, he's off to the side, eyes locked not on you, but on the man behind the camera. His father. And the look. It's not a smile. It's pure calculation. That photo never meant anything to you before. Just another page in the album your mother kept too neat. But now it's like the truth's been hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to grow into the eyes that could see it. You call Jules. You don't tell her everything. Not yet. Just enough. Mason's hiding something, you say. About Tilly. About me. About the whole family. She doesn't ask questions. She just breathes. Then says, "Do you need me to help burn the place down or just pass the matches?" You smile for the first time that day. "I'll need both. But first I need a mic." She hesitates. "What are you planning?" You look at your reflection again. The dress still untouched. The vows still in your purse. I'm going to let him think he's won. And then, you meet your own eyes. Steady, cold, freezing over like a lake that's about to crack. Then I'm going to let everyone else know who he really is. Because this isn't just about a ruined wedding anymore. This is about the proposal that wasn't real, the love that was staged, and the truth that's been waiting 20 years for the right moment to ruin a perfect day. And you're done waiting. The thing about secrets is they never really die. You don't bury them, you just repot them. Like ugly plants in nicer planters. Give them a new room, a new story, maybe change the lighting a little. But they always grow back. And sometimes they bloom on your wedding day. You woke up early again. You'd barely slept. Not out of nerves, not really. More like your brain was rifling through old drawers looking for warnings you hadn't listened to. The wedding was set for 3 p.m., but at 7:40, you found yourself on the floor of your childhood bedroom digging through an old shoebox labeled Tilly's junk. Your mom never touched it after Tilly vanished. Claimed it made her too emotional, but she never threw it out either. That box had lived under your bed, through boyfriends, breakups, bad grades, and therapy. You always knew it was there. You just didn't want to look, until now. Inside were the usual suspects. A sparkly slap bracelet, half a friendship necklace yours said. B. Fry hers was missing a Lisa Frank notebook with way too many cat stickers. And the sticky notes. You found the first one tucked into a crumpled origami frog. The handwriting was crooked looped, definitely Tilly's. It said, "Don't trust the one who says it's all pretend." Cryptic, yes, but in kid code it made perfect sense. Tilly always left messages in weird places. Once she hid a note in your cereal box that said, "He's watching from the stairs." You thought it was a game. You laughed and threw it away. You were 7. The second sticky was folded into a tiny square taped under the cardboard divider. You peeled it off like it was radioactive. Check the red box in the closet. You froze. The red box. It was still there. You remembered it clearly. Tacky velvet gold clasp originally held costume jewelry from some off-brand department store. You hadn't opened it in years. You thought your mom tossed it? You were wrong. You pulled it out, hands shaking, the clasp sticking. Inside were more notes, thinner paper ripped, like they'd been torn from a school binder, scribbled in pencil. Some faded, some fresh. He said, "I can't tell or he'll make her leave. It's not my fault," she cries in the garage. "If I hide the pictures, he can't show anyone." Your breath caught. A coldness spread under your ribs like ice spidering out from your spine. It was always he. You didn't know if she meant Mason's dad, your own, someone else. But there was fear in those words. Fear written in a child's loops and misspellings. You snapped a photo of each note, backed them up to 3 different clouds. You were done with trusting fate. Then, at the very bottom, one final sticky bright pink dead center in the box, like a heart. "If I go missing, ask Mason. He knows." You sat there for a long time. You didn't cry. Tears would have felt like giving him something. You just breathed. Slow, deep. And you said out loud, "Okay," because it was time to stop asking questions and start answering them. You brought the box downstairs. Your mom was in the kitchen microwaving coffee and icing cupcakes she insisted on making herself because no one does buttercream right anymore. She turned, smiled. "You look pale, cold feet." You held up the red box. Her smile faded. "Where'd you find that?" Same place it's always been, you said. Under my bed. She put down the cupcake. I didn't think it was yours, she muttered. It wasn't, you said? It was Tilly's. She didn't answer. You stepped closer. Did you know what was in it? Her face froze in a way you hadn't seen since you were a kid. Tight jaw, eyes, darting lips pressed like a bad seal. The kind of freeze that says, I don't want to lie, but I'm going to. I thought she was just confused, she said softly. Kids make things up. You raised a brow. This much. She looked away. She always had a big imagination. She said Mason knew. That got her. Her shoulders flinched. Not visibly, but you noticed. Your voice turned steel. Did he? She whispered it. I don't know. But you didn't believe her. Because your mom has a habit of not knowing things that might cost her comfort. She turned back to the cupcakes. It's your wedding day. Let's not drag the past into it. You didn't answer, just left the box on the counter. Let her frost around the truth. The wedding was still on. You were still wearing the dress. But now you were carrying something more dangerous than a bouquet. You had evidence, and you had a plan. It started with the seating chart. You moved Margot from unassigned to table 4 next to your Aunt Bonnie, the one who had no filter and a reputation for finding out everything before it trended. You called the DJ, asked if the mic was cordless. He said yes. You rehearsed your vows, but not the ones you'd written last month. New ones, sharper. And then you asked Jules to be ready with the camcorder. Start filming before I walk down the aisle, you told her. And don't stop. She nodded, no questions. Because the day wasn't about promising forever anymore. It was about unearthing everything that was buried. And letting the flowers wilt in real time. You don't notice the lies in a wedding toast unless you know what to look for. The pauses. The words not said. The throat clears. The hands clutching the stem of a champagne flute a little too tight. You'd written dozens of these toasts for other people. You knew the rhythm. Funny anecdote. Heartfelt pivot. Emotional gut punch. Gentle closer. But when Mason's best man Trevor stepped up to the mic, you could already feel the formula unraveling. He looked nervous. Not don't like public speaking nervous. More like please don't make eye contact with her nervous. You watched from behind the floral arch as he adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and launched into a story about Mason's high school band days. We called ourselves Vinyl Famine, he chuckled, because we were hungry for the spotlight and allergic to rhythm. Everyone laughed. Even you a little. The joke was fine. Harmless. Too harmless. But then he started edging into the past, and Mason's always been the guy who could smooth things over. Calm everyone down. Even when things got weird, he knew how to handle it. Your ears pricked. Weird? Handle it. You watched his fingers fidget on the microphone. His eyes flicked just once toward you. And that's when you saw it. Guilt. Not the heavy sobbing kind. The slippery kind that grins too wide. Mason's someone who protects people, Trevor said. Even if it means not telling the whole story. Your stomach turned. The crowd smiled, thinking it was sentimental. You knew better. Because that wasn't a compliment. That was a confession in camouflage. He was telling you something. Maybe not on purpose. But something. You flashed back to the night you and Mason hosted your first dinner party. Trevor got too drunk and cornered you in the kitchen. Told you laughing that Mason has a way of cleaning up messes. You thought he meant dishes. Now, you weren't so sure. Trevor wrapped up the toast. He raised his glass. To love, to second chances, and to knowing when to keep a secret. There it was. You almost choked on your champagne? The claps came too quickly. The room moved on. But your mind didn't. It stayed right there, circling that last sentence like a hawk over something dying. After the toast, you pulled Jules aside. Did you get all of that? You asked. She nodded. Every word. Good. Keep rolling. She looked at you, eyes flickering with both worry and awe. You're really doing this, huh? You smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't touch your eyes. Yeah, I'm not marrying a man who hides behind toasts. The ceremony was 30 minutes away. You ducked out the side door of the venue, heart-racing veil still draped over your arm like an afterthought. You needed air. You needed to breathe. You ended up behind the catering tent next to a stack of folding chairs and a suspiciously loud portable generator. That's where you found Margot leaning against a tree smoking something that smelled like stress and menthol. She raised an eyebrow. Runaway bride moment. Recon mission, you replied. What else aren't you telling me? She flicked ash off her sleeve. I've told you what matters. No, you told me what you think matters, you said. But Trevor's toast. That wasn't just awkward. That was a warning. Margot exhaled. Long. Measured. Trevor knew. Maybe not all of it. But enough. Enough to stop this. You asked. She looked at you for a long time. Enough to know it won't stop unless you do something. You thought about the sticky notes. The box. The drawings. Tilly's handwriting messy and scared. Then you looked down at your wedding dress. White. Clean. A lie, basically. And you made your choice. You walked back inside. Guests were already seated. The string quartet was playing that soft prelude music that sounds like hope and high heels. Mason stood at the front in his tailored navy suit looking every bit the man a Pinterest board would marry. You didn't wave. You didn't smile. You just took your cue. The music shifted. Everyone turned. And you began to walk. Not slowly, not gracefully. You walked like someone heading into battle, like someone carrying dynamite under satin. Halfway down the aisle, you saw Mason's eyes flicker just like Trevor's had. A moment of recognition, of fear. You reached him, took his hands, leaned close, and whispered, "Smile." For the camera, his lips twitched. You turned to the crowd, cleared your throat, and began. I wrote vows, you said, but I'm not reading them. Murmurs. You continued, calm, steady, icy, because this day wasn't built on love. It was built on silence, en secret, on people who disappeared so others could play, pretend. You heard a chair scrape. Someone gasped. Mason's hand tensed in yours. You let go. You pulled the mic closer. I know who helped cover it up. I know who lied. I know which boy never spoke up when a girl he loved was scared. Trevor stood. Danny, don't. You looked at him and smiled. Don't worry. I already did. Then you turned to Jules. Play it. And she did. Tilly's voice. From a camcorder. Scratchy. Young. If I go missing, ask Mason. He knows. It was the silence that followed that stuck with you, not the gasp. Not the one woman near the back who said, "Oh my God," like she was watching a particularly juicy courtroom drama. No, it was that long, bottomless pause after Tilly's voice crackled through the speakers, like the whole room forgot how to breathe. Then the whispers started. Not loud, just hissing. 100 tiny snakes slithering between rows of chairs. Mason stood frozen next to you, still holding half a smile like he hadn't realized the performance was over. You watched it flicker. D. Then something in his face, some mask he'd worn so long it had become muscle memory, finally slipped. What is this? He asked quietly. You tilted your head. You know what it is. The DJ had stopped the music mercifully. One of the groomsmen looked like he wanted to dive under the floral arch and never come back. Your mother was gripping the back of her chair like it was a life preserver. And Margot, she hadn't even blinked. Just sat there, arms crossed, calm as a sunrise. You turned back to the crowd. I know this isn't what you came for, you said, voice steady. You came for cake and love and overlong speeches about how we met on Bumble. You came to smile and cry and pretend everything in this family was exactly what it looked like. You paused. Let your words sink. But nothing in this family has ever been what it looked like. Now the whispers were louder. Mason stepped forward. Danny, don't do this. Don't do what? You said, turning to him. Tell the truth. His jaw clenched. You're confused. That tape, Tilly was a kid. She said stuff all the time that didn't make sense. You stepped closer. She said you knew, and you never said anything. Not when she disappeared. Not when they said she ran away. Not when I cried for her and you just handed me a box of juice and said, "Don't worry about it." His eyes darted. We were kids. Kids remember, you said. Kids know when something's wrong. And you knew. Another voice cut through the crowd. Jewel, from behind her phone. I've got backup copies, by the way, she said sweetly. Just in case anyone wants to call this a fake. You didn't even need to nod. She was already uploading. Margot stood, calmly. Mason, she said, her voice sharp and flat. When Tilly came to you and told you what she'd seen, Did you tell your father? Mason looked like a man trying to swallow fire. I didn't believe her, he said. She was always dramatic. You could almost hear Tilly's ghost laughing. Margot didn't back down. Did you tell your father yes or no? He didn't answer. Didn't have to, because silence in that moment was an answer louder than any scream. Someone stood up near the back. Aunt Bonnie. Eyebrows raised like she was watching the juiciest telenovela of her life. I knew there was something off about that man, she muttered. Always brought that weird meat to the potlucks. A ripple of uncomfortable chuckles slid across the guests like a nervous wave. You took a breath. Not shaky. Not afraid. Then you turned, lifted your dress just enough to move, and walked. Not down the aisle. Not toward Mason. You walked away. Right through the garden gate and into the sun. Jules followed. Camera still rolling. You heard her behind you whispering, "Are you okay?" And the truth. You weren't. Not really. But you were more okay than you'd been in years. Because you finally stopped pretending. Mason didn't chase you. Of course he didn't. He knew it was over. Not just the wedding. But the version of you that would have let him win. You ended up by the pond veil, trailing behind you like an afterthought. You sat on a bench and laughed. Not loudly. Just this soft, disbelieving chuckle that slipped out like a bird escaping a cage. Jules sat beside you. You did it, she said. Not yet, you replied. This is only the first domino. She tilted her head. What's next? You held up the flash drive Margot gave you earlier. There's more. Documents. Letters. She said she finally got a court order unsealed. About Mason's dad. Jules blinked. You're going full investigative podcast mode. Why not? You said, might as well get some closure and some content. She grinned. You want me to edit the video? You nodded. Because the wedding may have ended, but the story, it was just getting started. And you were done being the silent sister. Tilly's voice had finally been heard. Now it was time for yours. You didn't sleep that night. Not even close. You tried. Got into bed, still wearing half the dress veil on the doorknob, makeup smudged like war paint, and stared at the ceiling while your phone buzzed with messages ranging from, "Are you okay?" to "Girl, what?" Trevor called 3 times. Mason texted once. "Please don't do this." Like you hadn't already done it. Around 3 a.m., you gave up on pretending to rest and pulled out the camcorder Margot had slipped you just before the ceremony went full documentary. It looked ancient. Something that belonged in a thrift store bin between VHS copies of Speed 2 and a broken toaster. But it powered on. And inside, a single tape. You held your breath, pressed play. The screen flickered. The timestamp read, July 19th, 2004. Tilly was in the frame, barefoot, sunburned, and gripping that same stuffed bear cheese like it was her lifeline. She sat cross-legged on what looked like the garage floor talking to someone off-screen. He told me not to say anything, she said, voice soft. Said if I did, he'd show Mom the pictures. A pause, then a whisper. What pictures? Tilly's eyes darted. From the shed. He took them when I was playing dress-up. You paused the tape. You couldn't breathe. You rewound. Played it again. This time you let it keep rolling. Tilly whispered something you couldn't quite catch, then nodded toward a box in the corner. I put everything in there, so he can't use it anymore. But Mason saw. He promised he'd help me hide it. You froze. That was it. Proof that Mason wasn't just silent. He was involved. He knew. He helped. The screen crackled to static. You sat there for a long time. Then you did something you hadn't done since high school. You threw up. Afterward, sitting on the bathroom floor, you messaged Margot. I watched it. She was terrified. Her reply was instant. I know. Now you understand why I came back. You messaged Jules next. We're not done. I need your help. Her response. Name the time, the place, and the pitchfork size. You smiled. Just a little, then got up, changed, and started planning the second half of your revenge. The next morning, you filed a report with the local police. Margot had already sent them her copies of the tape. The officer at the front desk looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Anything else to add? He asked without looking up. You slid the red sticky note across the counter. If I go missing, ask Mason. He knows. He looked up then. Yeah, you said. I thought that might get your attention. By noon, a detective was assigned. By 2, Mason's name was flagged in connection with 2 sealed juvenile records. By 4, a car showed up outside his apartment. You didn't watch them take him. You were too busy watching the video Jules had just uploaded. The title: My Wedding Was a Lie. The Truth About My Fiancé and My Missing Sister. It had over 30,000 views in 4 hours. The comments section was already a mix of supportive strangers and chaos goblins asking if you were single. You didn't respond. You weren't doing this for sympathy or clout. You were doing it because someone finally had to say Tilly's name in a sentence that didn't end in a shrug. You remembered the last time you saw her? She was wearing your favorite shirt, the one with the glow-in-the-dark stars. You'd screamed at her for stealing it. She stuck her tongue out. Called you a glitter goblin. You never saw her again. Now you knew why. You whispered "I'm sorry" into the quiet. The camcorder blinked its final red light. Out of battery, like it had held on long enough to finish the job. You opened your laptop, started writing everything down. Every sticky note, every name, every gap. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was an excavation. And the bones, they weren't just buried. They were archived, protected, hidden behind the politeness of a family that told you to smile and let go. Well, you were done smiling, and you were never letting go. You never thought the caterer would be part of the story. But the morning after your wedding blew up on YouTube and local TV, someone from Sunflower Sage Events and Catering left you a voicemail. A woman named Lila, nervous voice, shaky breath. Hi, Denny. We need to talk. I think there was a mistake in your wedding order. Or maybe not. Honestly, I'm not sure if it was a mistake or okay. Please call me. You stared at the phone. Your brain did that buffering thing where it tried to decide if this was plot development or just leftover wedding chaos. You called her back? She answered on the first ring. Thank God, she said. Okay, so this might be nothing, but you didn't book us. You blinked. Excuse me? Your wedding, Lila said, voice lowering. We have no contract under your name, no signed invoice, no payment on record. We were booked through a third-party service event matchmaker, super generic, no paper trail. Paid in full under the name Arbor Services. That rang weird because we don't do landscaping. You sat down. But the weirdest part, Lila said, the contact number on the Arbor file matched the number your fiancé gave us at the tasting. You closed your eyes. Mason. Of course. He booked the caterer under a fake company. Why? Lila hesitated before adding, and this is probably nothing, but he requested one very specific dish. You waited. Peach cobbler, she said. Exactly the way your sister described in that YouTube video. The one she said your mom used to make every time she wanted to bribe her back into silence. Your stomach turned. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a callback. You hung up, sat there letting the weight settle in. Mason hadn't just lied. He'd curated the entire event, catering included, with callbacks to your childhood, like they were wedding favors. Like this was some cruel meta-performance only he was in on. Why cobbler? Why now? You dug through the red box again. Tilly had written something on the back of one sticky note. He said dessert is how you forget. That's why he made me eat it after. You dropped the paper. Suddenly it all clicked. Mason wasn't trying to erase your past. He was trying to rewrite it. Control the narrative. Dress up the trauma in linens and frosting so no one would dare look beneath the tablecloth. He knew you'd dig eventually, so he left little distractions. Symbolic landmines, like that peach cobbler. You called Margot. Did he ever mention Arbor Services? Pause. No, she said. But that was the name of the apartment complex where I first met his dad. The one he moved out of after Tilly disappeared. Of course it was. Of course he used that name to book the caterer. Because Mason wasn't burying the truth anymore. He was archiving it. Cataloging every painful detail like trophies hidden inside your big day. Cobbler photos, speeches, seating arrangements. All of it just believable enough to look random. All of it carefully calculated. All of it meant to haunt you. He didn't just want you to stay quiet. He wanted you to wonder, to question your own memory, to doubt every smile, every menu, every song choice. You picked up your phone and texted Jules. We're going live again. I need to explain the cobbler. She didn't question it. Because at this point, The cobbler mattered. And in the comments of your second live video, someone posted a photo. It was an old catering event, 4 years ago. Mason standing in the background with a clipboard next to a man you didn't recognize until Margot confirmed it. That's his uncle, she said. He worked security at a facility for juvenile offenders. The same facility where Mason was supposedly sent after an incident when he was 13. The sealed record. The one Margot finally unsealed. Inside it, a disciplinary note. Mason had been caught trying to smuggle out a VHS tape from the facility's archive room. You knew what that meant. He'd been trying to erase something even then. Tilly's tape. It wasn't just a risk to him. It was insurance for her. And he'd spent the last 20 years trying to find it. Only she hid it better than he could imagine. In the red box. In the camcorder. In you. Because Tilly knew the safest place to hide something was in plain sight inside the life of the only person who ever believed her. And now, you were done being the vault. You were ready to burn the whole archive. You ended the live video with 6 words. This wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a crime scene. And then you hit post. Because people needed to know, not just what happened, but how close evil can sit beside you, and how easily it can disguise itself with dessert. The champagne bottles were still chilling in the venue fridge when you got the call. Private number? You almost didn't pick up, but curiosity is a better drug than caffeine, and you hadn't slept in 3 days. Danny Rhodes, said a woman's voice. Professional. Slightly clipped like someone who alphabetizes her sock drawer. Yes. My name is Elise Holtz. I'm with the Charleston District Attorney's Office. We need to speak with you about a minor who went missing in 2004. Your sister Tilly. Your mouth went dry. We're reopening the case, Elise said. You didn't move. Didn't speak, she continued. We've received multiple video recordings, notes, witness testimony. There are enough red flags to make a circus. A breath. Then, and Mason Clark is now officially a person of interest. You whispered. Took you long enough. She chuckled, not kindly. Bureaucracy doesn't age well, but it does keep receipts. She asked you to come in. You did. You wore black. Not to be dramatic, but because it felt appropriate. You weren't grieving a wedding. You were dressing for a funeral you never got to attend. Inside the DA's office, you were ushered past rows of beige desks and folders stacked like Jenga towers. Elise met you in a side conference room with cheap coffee and very expensive silence. I've reviewed everything she said. The tapes, the sticky notes, the footage from your wedding live stream? She said live stream the way old people say TikTok, like it might bite her. We believe Tilly's disappearance was not voluntary. We also believe multiple adults in your family may have played a role in covering it up. You nodded slowly. Can I ask? You hesitated. Is Mason's father being charged? She tilted her head. He died in 2012. Heart attack. No autopsy. But she opened a folder. His name shows up in several complaints filed in the late 90s. Most were dismissed. A few were sealed, because he worked in law enforcement. Elise didn't answer, but her face did. You sat back. Tried to breathe through it. Your father, your real one, had been out of the picture since you were 2. Tilly's was always the other man, the one no one wanted to name. The one your mom refused to admit had ever existed, even when Tilly begged for the truth. Elise passed you another folder. Inside, a photo. Tilly, age 9. Same one Margot had shown you, but now with a file stamp. Unsubstantiated runaway. It felt like reading her obituary. You whispered she deserved better. We agree, Elise said. Which is why we're charging Mason Clark with obstruction and falsifying evidence. If we can prove his silence helped his father avoid investigation, we might go further. Your hands curled into fists. What about my mom? Elise exhaled. We don't know yet. You nodded. Because you did. You always had. After the meeting, you stood outside the courthouse steps. Sun too bright. The kind of day people call beautiful without asking who's squinting. You pulled out your phone. Jules had texted. He's on house arrest. Ankle monitor. Guess your vows stuck after all. You almost smiled. Then another message followed. Also, you need to see this. It was a link. A Facebook post. Shared 100,000 times. The wedding that turned into a true crime investigation. It included clips from your live stream. Quotes from the notes. A blurry still of Mason's stunned face as Tilly's voice echoed through the speakers. The comments. Wild. Some called you brave. Some said you were an attention seeker. Some compared you to Erin Brockovich, if she had better lighting. But buried deep in the thread, one comment stopped you cold. It was a name. Tilly. Not your sister, but a girl same name, different state. Who wrote, I left because no one believed me either. Watching this made me feel seen. Thank you. You stared at it for a long time. Then whispered, You're welcome. Because this wasn't just your story anymore. It was every girl who'd been told to sit still and smile. Every sister who disappeared. Every voice that got smaller and smaller until even the family forgot how it sounded. Well, you remembered, and now, so would everyone else. Because Tilly didn't vanish. She was erased. And you were done holding the eraser. It's funny the things you notice when everything falls apart. Not the big dramatic cracks, but the subtle shifts. The florist canceling your future bookings due to reputational risk. Your mom going silent, then suddenly booking a healing retreat in Sedona. The way even your old bridal clients now called you brave instead of professional. Like trauma made you marketable. You didn't reply to most of them. But one message stopped you. It was from a girl named Kara, 18. She said she'd found your story through a Reddit thread titled Wedding Planners Who Exposed Family Secrets, which to your surprise had its own subreddit. Kara wrote, My cousin did things to me. My mom said not to make a fuss. But after watching your video, I told her she doesn't get to decide what's forgotten. Thank you for helping me remember my anger. You read it 3 times. You cried on the 4th. Because that's what no one tells you about revenge. It's never just about the person you're going after. It's about everyone who learned to survive by being quiet. Everyone who taped their own mouths shut because someone older said, It's better this way. You replied to Kara, Your anger is sacred. Don't let anyone wash it off you. That night, you did something bold. You returned to the venue. It wasn't locked. The owner, bless her chaotic curiosity, had messaged you earlier. I left the key under the flower pot. In case you want closure or good lighting for a follow-up. You walk through the space in flats. No makeup, hair unstyled. Just you and your shadow. The chairs were still stacked. The arch was still intact. Even the floral centerpieces had survived, though they were starting to wilt. You sat in the first row and just listened. It was silent. But in the way an attic is silent, thick with what's been left behind. You pulled the last of Tilly's sticky notes from your purse. The one you hadn't read out loud. The one that was too short. Too final. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. It wasn't meant for the police. It wasn't for Margot. It was for you. You whispered, It's okay. Then tucked the note into the center of a dying lily. Because maybe some things didn't need to bloom again. They just needed to be seen. You dusted your hands and walked toward the mirror on the far wall. The one where brides used to check their makeup before the aisle. You looked different. Not older. Not broken. Just sharper. More in focus. Like your own version of high definition. Then behind you a voice. Dunny. You turned. Mason! Standing in the doorway. Wearing house arrest like an accessory. He looked thinner. Hair overgrown. Eyes not quite meeting yours. I'm not supposed to be here. He said like that would impress you. You didn't move. I just wanted to say, I didn't know it would go this far. You blinked. You mean getting caught. No, he started, then stopped. You made me look like a monster. You tilted your head. You did that yourself. He walked forward. Just one step. I didn't hurt her. Maybe not with your hands, you said. But you helped bury her. I was 13. So was she. He looked down. And for the first time in your entire history with Mason Clark, he didn't have a comeback. No charming deflection. No PR smile. Just guilt. Raw and sour. You stepped closer. You didn't ruin my wedding, Mason. You ruined my memory of her. You let me grow up thinking she left us. Thinking she didn't love me enough to stay. He swallowed. Hard. I'm sorry, he whispered. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. Still you nodded. Not for him. For yourself. Good, you said. Now leave. He did. No protest. Just turned and walked out the way cowards always do, quietly when no one's looking. You stayed for a while longer. Then left the note. left the flowers, left the past sitting there under the arch still trying to rehearse its lines. You walked out into the night. No bouquet, no regrets. Just the wind in your hair and the sweet, quiet hum of a story finally being told. You didn't expect a letter. Not in this century, but it came in the mail anyway. Real envelope, no return address, handwriting that looked like it had practiced holding a secret. Inside, 2 pages, folded carefully, smelled faintly of mildew and something you couldn't name like forgotten rooms. It was from your mother. Of course it was. You read the first line standing up. Danny, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope someday you understand. The mother's anthem. Not, I'm sorry. Not you were right. Just I hope you understand, she went on. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to protect you. From what I knew, from what I didn't, from what I didn't want to believe about the man I let into our house. You sat down. Because even though you were prepared for something, you weren't ready for her to say it. She admitted it. Not directly, not with bullet points. But between the lines, she confessed she'd known something was wrong with Mason's father. That Tilly had come to her crying. That she'd brushed it off as imagination because the truth felt too heavy to carry. And then she was gone. And I knew I had chosen wrong. You folded the page, breathed, unfolded the second. I didn't report it. I didn't scream. I didn't burn the house down. I just told myself it would go away. And then I watched you fall in love with Mason, and all I could think was, maybe this time, the lie will hold. But it didn't, because lies always buckle under their own weight. There it was, the closest thing to a confession you were ever going to get. You didn't cry. You didn't yell. You just stared at the ink like it might rearrange itself into something more satisfying. It didn't. The final line read, if you ever want to talk, I'll be at the cabin. You know the one. The cabin? The place where you and Tilly used to play hide and seek before hide became permanent. You folded the letter, tucked it back in the envelope, slid it into the drawer with the rest of the evidence. Not out of spite, just storage. Because closure isn't about confronting someone. Sometimes it's about choosing not to. You picked up your phone. No new calls from Mason. The silence was luxurious. But there was a voicemail. From Detective Holloway. We've opened a second line of inquiry, he said. Turns out your fiancé's father wasn't just connected to one missing child. He's part of a larger pattern. Cross-state complaints. Similar MO. Sealed files. Your heart slowed. Not fear. Not even shock. Just a deep, bone-level confirmation of something you'd always known but hadn't wanted to look at too closely. Tilly wasn't the only one. You asked Holloway for the case numbers. He said they'd be forwarded. You spent the next few hours compiling everything you'd collected: notes, audio, the camcorder footage, even screenshots of Mason's old texts with his clumsy attempts at reassurance. Don't dig too deep, Danny. It'll just hurt you. You were going to make sure that line got printed on a t-shirt. By midnight, you'd submitted the entire file to 3 investigative journalists, 2 podcasts, and a nonprofit that helps cold cases find daylight. Not for fame, not even for justice, but because if Tilly was going to be a headline, you wanted it to be the right one. No runaway, no troubled girl, just a kid who tried to speak, and a world that forgot how to listen. You stood by your window watching the breeze shake the trees like they were shrugging off something heavy. Then your phone buzzed again. Another message. From someone named Ava. My sister disappeared in 2007. You just helped me remember her name. You sat with that one for a while, because that's what grief is really. Remembering a name you were told to forget. And now, you were making sure nobody ever forgot hers again. The photographer sent the photos anyway. She said she didn't want to assume you didn't want them. That maybe they'd help process the trauma or become part of your healing journey, like this was a spa brochure and not a crime scene in chiffon. You almost deleted the file unopened, but curiosity has its claws. You opened it. There you were, walking down the aisle, eyes laser-focused veil softening your fury. And Mason in frame after frame wearing that too bright smile, the one that never reached his eyes. The one you now realized was hiding an entire family history in his molars. You kept clicking. Click, your mom mid-nervous laugh. Click, Jules adjusting your train, her face, Equal parts, friend and bodyguard. Click, then pause. There it was. One photo. One freeze frame of Mason whispering to Trevor during the ceremony. You could see it clearly. The way Trevor leaned in. The way Mason's hand covered his mouth, like they were on the sidelines of a football game, and not standing before 80 guests, and the most morally confused priest in Charleston. You zoomed in. Trevor's face. Panic, not surprise. Like he'd known what was coming and had just learned it would be televised. You sent it to Detective Holloway. He responded 20 minutes later. We'll talk to Trevor again. And Mason's former therapist if she agrees to speak. You stared at the screen thinking about all the people who must have known pieces. Friends, teachers, neighbors. People who nodded and smiled and said, well, every family's complicated. No, yours wasn't complicated. It was complicit. Later that evening you got a knock at the door. You opened it with the usual tightness in your chest, but it wasn't Mason. Not the police. Not a stranger with a ring light asking for podcast rights. It was a teenage girl, maybe 15, hoodie, hair a mess, holding something wrapped in plastic. Are you Danny? She asked. You nodded. I found this behind a drawer at the Arbor Complex, she said. I saw your video. Thought it might be yours. You took the package gently. Inside. Another tape, labeled in marker. Tilly, birthday, 2003. Your knees buckled just a little. You thanked the girl. She nodded like she didn't want to make it weird and left before you could cry or offer cookies. You played the tape that night. It started with cupcakes. Tilly, in a plastic crown, singing off-key, and then a shift. She was sitting in front of the same red box, holding it like it held treasure or a map. This is where I'm keeping it, she said to the camera, so if anyone ever finds this, they'll know I wasn't lying. Then she whispered, Danny, if you see this, don't let them say I was confused. Don't let them say I ran away. I just wanted to stay safe. That's not the same thing. You paused it, stared, then rewound and watched it again, over and over, until her words carved themselves into your spine. Don't let them say I was confused. You'd carried that lie like a family heirloom, polished it, displayed it at holidays, let it decorate your wedding day like a centerpiece. But not anymore. You transcribed the tape, uploaded the footage, and titled it simply, Tilly's Voice Uncut. You didn't add commentary. You didn't need to. She spoke for herself. And this time, the world listened. You got the call just before sunrise. It was Holloway. We've got something, he said. You'll want to come in. No dramatic tone. No tease. Just quiet finality like he already knew what it meant to you. You arrived at the precinct in jeans and the same hoodie you hadn't taken off in 3 days. No makeup. No script. Just a coffee in your hand and Tilly's voice in your head. Holloway slid a file across the desk. We found the missing maintenance logs for Arbor Apartments. You opened it. Read the names. One stood out. Graham Clark, Mason's father. Logged in as on-site consultant for security issues, except there was no record of employment. No taxes. No W-2. Basically, Holloway said he was working off the books. And no one ever asked why. You flipped the page. A complaint. Dated July 18, 2004. Noise disturbance. Garage Unit B. Handwritten note in the margin. Child crying. Sounded scared. You stared at it. The complaint was never followed up, because it was made by Margot. And the responding officer, Graham Clark. Your hands went numb. He logged his own call. You whispered. Holloway nodded grimly, then marked it resolved. He didn't need to say it out loud. You knew what it meant. Graham had gotten the call that might have saved Tilly and buried it. Literally and figuratively. There was more. A signed statement from a former maintenance worker. Said Graham asked him to clear out the garage that week. Gave him cash to do it off the books. When the guy refused, Graham told him to forget he saw anything. The man quit 3 days later. Moved states. Changed his name. He came forward after seeing your live stream. It was all clicking now. The way Mason flinched every time the past got too close. The way your mother suddenly refused to talk about the garage. The way that garage became a ghost in your own memories. You whispered. That's where she disappeared. Holloway didn't argue. You sat in silence for a while, then finally asked, "Is this enough?" He paused. "We're reopening Tilly's case as a probable homicide." You nodded, slowly. "And Mason?" You asked. "He's under investigation for accessory after the fact." Accessory. You let the word sink in like a stone in your gut. It wasn't just about what he knew, it was what he chose to do with it. You left the station and went straight to the cabin. The one your mom mentioned. The one with chipped siding and the creaky deck tucked deep in the woods like even the trees didn't want to admit it existed. You knocked. She opened the door. No makeup, no defense. She looked smaller than you remembered. Like shame had eaten away all the fluff she used to hide behind. You didn't say anything, just walked inside. She offered tea. You didn't take it. "Is it true?" you asked. She nodded. "Did you know it was him?" you asked. Her eyes filled. "I suspected." You breathed deep. "That's not the same thing as knowing." She looked away. "I was afraid," she whispered, "of what it would do to the family. To you. To me. I thought if I buried it deep enough." You buried her, you said. Not just the truth. The silence between you was thick, like you'd both walked into a confessional too late. You reached into your bag, pulled out the copy of the sticky notes, the tapes, the statement from Margot, and laid them on the table like a deck of cursed cards. "This is what you helped hide," you said. Her hands trembled. "I know," she said, "and I don't expect you to forgive me." "I don't forgive you," you said plainly, "but I need you to sign this." You handed her a document, Margot's petition to officially name Tilly's disappearance a wrongful death. It wouldn't bring her back, but it would change the record. Your mom signed it with the same hand that once tied Tilly's shoes and zipped up her coats. You left without another word. You didn't cry. You didn't need to anymore. The truth was loud enough. That night, you uploaded one final clip to your channel. Tilly's voice again. Her laughter. Her drawing a crooked house and naming each window after someone she loved. "This one's Danny's room," she said. "She gets the window with the moon." Then your voice, reading her last sticky note. "If I go missing, ask Mason. He knows." The video ended with a black screen and 4 words. "We asked. We know." The press came slowly at first. A few blogs. A local true crime podcast with a spooky intro and a host who mispronounced your name like you were the villain in a telenovela. Then a YouTuber with 2 million subscribers made a deep dive called "The Wedding That Exposed a 20-Year Lie." After that, it exploded. Your inbox turned radioactive. Producers, reporters, strangers who felt connected and others who were praying for your journey. A woman from Nebraska offered to embroider Tilly's name onto a quilt made for survivors of silence. The noise was deafening. You turned most of it down. But one message stopped you. It was from a girl named Lena. She lived in Portland, worked at a record shop. She said she watched the live stream not because she cared about weddings, but because the algorithm shoved it in her face like fate. Then she saw Tilly's face and recognized her. They had lived in the same neighborhood, she said. Played tag on rusty monkey bars. Tilly gave her half a Twix once and told her a secret. That she had an older cousin who scared her. She told me Lena wrote that he said if she ever told anyone, he'd make it look like she wanted to disappear. Your heart stopped. Because even then at 10, Tilly knew what they'd say. That she ran away. That she was dramatic. That she made it up. Lena attached a photo. Tilly and her arms slung around each other, smiling. No fear in her face. Just sunlight. You stared at it for a long time. Then forwarded it to Holloway, and to Margot, and finally to yourself. Because this wasn't just evidence. It was proof she was more than a headline. She was real. And someone remembered her joy. A month passed. Then 2, and one crisp morning in October, you stood at a different kind of ceremony. No music. No guests in matching outfits. No overpriced centerpieces. Just a tree, a bench, and a plaque. Tilly Rhodes. 1993 to 2004. She told the truth. We heard her. You were the only one there besides Jules and Margot. And that was enough. You read a short note. Nothing dramatic. No big revelations. Just, you were right. I remember you. I always did. Then you placed the red velvet box beneath the bench where no one would find it but the earth. Margot wiped her cheek. Jules squeezed your hand. No one said the word justice because that word had sharp edges and unfinished corners. But peace, that one fit. You sat on the bench as the wind passed through the leaves. It didn't feel like a whisper. It felt like a laugh, like a sister, like she saw the whole thing unfold and decided to stay for the ending. Later that day, you posted one last video. No music, no title card, no drama, just you, sitting in front of the tree, speaking plainly. Not every ghost wants revenge, you said. Some just want to be remembered correctly. The screen faded to black, and for the first time since your wedding, your phone was quiet. No pings, no buzz, no new trauma, just stillness. And in that stillness, you heard her say, "You did good, Danny." So you smiled, closed the laptop, and finally let yourself sleep.